I used to believe that betrayal came from strangers, from enemies or rivals, but no one ever tells you that the worst betrayal doesn't come with warning signs. It comes from people who smile at your birthday cake and say they love you, the ones you let into your home without locking the door, the ones you call family. My story begins not with an act of cruelty but with love, or what I thought was love. My father was the steady center of our world. He worked hard, never raised his voice, hugged me every morning before school, told my mom she was beautiful even when she was still in her pajamas and tired from night shifts. I was 10 when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and 12 when he died, and in those 2 years I watched the strongest man I knew shrink until he couldn't even walk without help. Watched my mother age 10 years and one, watched myself grow silent because I didn't want to add weight to what already felt unbearable. After he passed, we were two people holding onto each other in a house that no longer felt warm. My mom stopped sleeping, I stopped talking, we drifted. My mom's brother Damon came back into our lives a few months later, said he wanted to help, said he missed family, said my dad was a good man and he wanted to do right by us. He came with groceries and jokes and old photos, said we shouldn't cry anymore because the worst was behind us, and for a while we believed him. I remember the first time he made me laugh. After months of silence, remember how my mom smiled at the sound like it was sunlight in winter. She started cooking again, started talking to the neighbors again, and little by little the house began to breathe again. Damon moved and said it would be easier to help us that way, said it was only temporary, but weeks became months. He offered to handle the bills, said my mom needed to rest, started looking at my dad's old files, the insurance policy, the investments, the savings, told her she shouldn't carry everything alone, that he knew people who could help grow what little we had left so we wouldn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. My mom resisted at first, but grief does something to people. It softens the edges, makes you trust what you shouldn't, and eventually she handed him control. He smiled like a savior, told me I could call him uncle again like when I was 5, told my mom to take a night class, said she was too smart to be stuck in retail. She listened because we wanted to believe someone still had our back. For the next year everything felt steady. My mom enrolled in nursing school. I joined the debate team again. Damon gave us monthly updates about how the money was growing, showed us charts and fake letters from banks, and I remember thinking maybe we were going to be okay again, until one Friday we came home and the front door was open, not broken, not forced, just open. The living room was half empty. Damon's room was gutted, the safe and the closet was gone. His phone went to voicemail. The bank told us the account was closed, the money transferred. My mom stood in the middle of the living room holding the folder of empty papers, shaking like she'd just watched someone die again. She didn't scream or sob, she just sat down on the floor like her legs forgot how to hold her, and I stood in the doorway frozen, not because I didn't understand but because I understood too well. Damon didn't just steal our money, he stole our trust, our last belief that someone would protect us. He took what was left of our security and vanished. My mom didn't call the police, not because she didn't want justice but because she said it would cost us more time, more hope, more pieces of ourselves, and we couldn't afford to lose anything else. She went back to work the next day as if nothing had happened, and I started waking up before dawn to deliver newspapers before school and wash dishes after class, not because she asked me to but because I couldn't stand watching her suffer alone. High school ended not with celebration but with exhaustion. I was 17, working 2 part-time jobs, one before school, one after, and barely keeping my grades up, not because I wasn't smart but because I was tired all the time and constantly afraid that something else would go wrong. My mom never complained, but I saw the bags under her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she came home from her night shift, and the way she flinched every time the phone rang like she expected more bad news. I learned how to cook basic meals, how to balance the checkbook, how to listen for signs that the rent might be late again. I stopped going to birthday parties, stopped playing video games, stopped dreaming because dreaming felt dangerous, like something rich kids were allowed to do but not me. And yet in all that noise and all that quiet pain, I applied to college, secretly using school computers between shifts and telling no one, not even my mom, because I didn't want to get her hopes up. I wrote essays at midnight, submitted applications on borrowed Wi-Fi, and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I still believed in, that maybe, just maybe, someone out there would see me. And someone did. I remember the moment the email arrived, the screen glowing in that dim apartment living room where the bulb had burned out weeks ago and we never had time to replace it. Full ride scholarship, housing included, a chance to leave to become something else. My mom cried when I told her, said it was a miracle, said I was her miracle. And I believed her because surviving felt like something holy. We packed what little I had into 2 suitcases and said goodbye at the bus station. She gave me a hand-packed lunch and a handwritten note that said, "You already make me proud no matter what happens." I sat on that bus watching the town shrink through the window, thinking maybe this was the first step toward breathing again. College was overwhelming. I didn't know how to dress, how to talk, how to be around people who had grown up with support and structure. In summers in Europe I got laughed at the first day because I brought a grocery bag instead of a backpack and wore shoes that had holes in them, but I didn't care because I had a desk of my own, a room with a door, and nobody could take it away from me. I studied harder than anyone else because I didn't have a safety net. There was no home to return to, no bank account waiting if I failed. I worked every weekend at the campus library, tutored other students in math and design, and ate more instant noodles than I could count. But slowly I started to grow. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done since my dad died. Filled notebooks with building ideas, structures that felt like poems, with windows and space and quiet light that healed instead of hiding. I joined an architecture club, entered design competitions, and won my first grant in sophomore year for a community housing proposal. I cried when I opened the letter because it was the first time someone put real money behind something I created. The professors started learning my name, started asking me questions, treating me like I belonged, and that small shift made all the difference. My junior year, I was selected for a mentorship with a Chicago-based architect known for sustainable living models. I flew there on a scholarship and stepped into a city that felt like a map of the future: tall buildings, soft parks, trains that moved like veins through glass and wind and shadow. I spent hours in that office drawing, presenting, revising, learning from failure and sharpening my voice. I stopped apologizing when I spoke, stopped shrinking myself, and started taking up the space I had earned by surviving. One Thursday afternoon on my walk home from the station, it started raining and I took a shortcut through a side street that smelled like metal and wet cardboard, and as I passed, a man slumped near a dumpster. He looked up and said my name just once, not loud, not dramatic, just like someone remembering something they never meant to forget. I froze, turned, and looked into the eyes of a ghost. Uncle Damon, thinner, grayer, hollowed out, but still him, still the man who made my mother collapse on the floor that day, still the man who took the only money we had and vanished with it. I stood there soaked in rain and disbelief and anger and something else, something I couldn't name. He stood slowly, said he didn't expect to ever see me again, said he'd been clean for 14 months, said he was working night shifts when he could and living in a church shelter. He looked ashamed but not pitiful, and when I asked why, he said because I was drowning and I thought if I just fixed it quick no one would notice, but I couldn't fix it and I didn't know how to come back. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was tired. He didn't ask for anything, didn't beg, just said I'm sorry, and I know that doesn't fix anything. I left without saying goodbye, walked back to my apartment and cried, not because I forgave him but because I didn't know what forgiveness even looked like anymore. I thought about telling my mom but couldn't, not yet, not when I didn't even know what I felt. And then one night she called and said she had dreamed of him, said he was cold and lost and needed something, and then asked me with a voice so soft I almost missed it, do you think he ever regretted it? I said I don't know, and she was quiet for so long I thought the line had disconnected. Then she said if he's ever ready to admit what he did I'd listen just once, and then she said not for him but for me. Weeks passed and I kept thinking about Damon, about that soaked alley, the look in his eyes like he'd already sentenced himself and was just waiting to serve the time. I didn't know what I owed him or if I owed him anything at all, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something unfinished was breathing just beneath my ribs. One night I pulled out my old sketchbook, the one I had back in high school, and flipped through pages filled with anger and desperation and hope and broken lines, and I saw a sketch I'd barely remembered making. It was a floor plan for a shelter, a small one made of modular pieces with natural light, angled roofs, rainwater collection, and privacy and shared spaces. It wasn't beautiful, it was raw, but it was real, and I stared at it for a long time. Then the next day I walked into the design lab, printed out a proposal, and filed an application for a community grant for emergency shelter prototypes. I didn't tell anyone, not my professors, not my friends, not even my mom. I didn't know if it was for Damon or for myself or for the kid I used to be sleeping on the couch because the bed was too close to memory. 3 weeks later the grant was approved, not huge money but enough to build a full-scale model. I emailed the shelter where Damon said he stayed, asked if they'd host a pilot. They said yes. I poured myself into the project, designed every inch like it mattered, like someone's dignity depended on it, and maybe it did. I visited the site every day, watched as it rose piece by piece, window by window, and on the final day when we unveiled it to the community, Damon was there. He stood in the back, not speaking, not drawing attention, just watching. I walked over, he looked at the building, then at me, and said I don't deserve this. I told him it wasn't about deserve, it was about doing something different. Now he didn't cry but his shoulders dropped like he was finally allowed to breathe. A week later I told my mom everything. She was quiet for a long time, then said bring him to dinner one time, not every week, not forever, just once. I called Damon and he came over dressed in clean clothes, holding a pie he probably bought at the gas station, and for the first half hour it was awkward. No one really knew what to say. Then my mom asked if he remembered the old record player from our dad's room, and suddenly they were laughing about things I didn't remember, moments from before the storm, and I just sat there watching this strange healing unfold, not neat, not complete, but real. After dinner Damon thanked her, said he didn't expect grace, and she said this isn't grace, this is letting go. I don't forgive you yet, but I want to try, and that's more than I thought I could do. When he left I asked her if she regretted inviting him, and she said I don't know, but I slept better tonight than I have in years, and I guess that means something. Months passed. I graduated with honors, got hired by a firm that specialized in sustainable housing, and I requested my first major project be a transitional housing complex for displaced families. They gave me the green light, and the first blueprint I drew was based on the shelter I built with Damon in mind. Damon now volunteers at that shelter full-time. He lives in a studio apartment paid for by a foundation grant and calls my mom every Sunday. Sometimes I join the call, sometimes I don't, but I always listen from the other room. Some people say family is who you choose, but I think sometimes family is who chooses to come back even after they broke everything and sit with you in the pieces, asking if you're willing to try one more time.
Sometimes betrayal doesn't just shatter your world, it shatters the way you see yourself, your worth, your trust in others. But I've learned that healing is not the same as forgetting, and forgiving doesn't mean pretending it never happened. Forgiveness is choosing not to carry the weight forever, even when the wound is deep, even when the apology comes years too late. And sometimes people do change, not everyone, but some, and if they're willing to sit in the hurt with you without running, maybe that's where rebuilding begins.